Okay, we're starting off with a treat. Okay, I have stumbled upon a new Rambam toy. Okay, and I'm calling it a toy right now as opposed to a tool because right now it's more like for my amusement and entertainment. But I'm sure at one point I will become able to master it and to wield it and use it for real purposes. But today we actually are going to use it for a real purpose. Okay, so let's start off with the halacha that we read last time, but then I'll work on. Okay, so this is halacha yud beis. Okay, Hilchos Torah Perek Gimel halacha yud beis. Amru Chachamim. So the Chachamim said, Bris Krusa, a covenant was sealed or was made. Shekol hayagea b'talmuda, that anyone who exerts himself in his learning, beveis hakneses, in Shul, lo bimhera hu mishakeach, he will not forget quickly. V'chol hayagea b'talmuda b'tzina machkim, and anyone who exerts himself in his learning b'tzina, in modesty, machkim, he becomes wise. Shneimar, as it says, tznuim chachma, with the modest is wisdom. And anyone who makes his voice audible at the time of his learning will persist in his hand. But one who reads silently, then he will forget quickly. Okay, so we're going to analyze it like we usually do. That's the plan. But I want to show you this toy. Okay, so the first line. Okay, so what do we say is weird about that line? That anyone who exerts himself in the Beis Knesses.
The person normally rides with the college.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah, sure.
Just continue on.
Sure.
Just tell you.
Okay, yeah. Right. So what do we say? Or what do you even remember? What is weird about that phrase? Anyone who is a a.k.a. Talmud of the Beis HaKnesses.
Why is it Beit HaKnesset, not like Beit Midrash?
Exactly. Why is it Beit Knesset, not Beit Midrash? Okay, so let's just review an old lesson in the Rambam. Okay, which is when you're learning Rambam, always use good Rambams. Okay, not bad Rambams. So this I have in my hand is a bad Rambam. Okay, this is what we call, again, the term is dfoos, which means published editions. And Kafich said that the published editions are so bad that in Yemen they would call a person who was like an imbecile a dfoos. Which I always like. I like how it works out in English that it's you could also say it's a pun on the word doofus, Okay, so let me read you what the published edition says. Okay, it says, Amru Chachamim Bris Krusa Shekol Hayageba Torasa Beis HaMidrash Lo Bimher Hu Mishakeach. Okay, so the standard edition say Beis Midrash. Now, so if you were reading the standard editions, you'd be like, oh, you wouldn't even think twice. You would just assume that it read naturally. Okay. Similarly, if you went to, and I'm not picking on them, but I am picking on them because this is Latoelis. If you go to Sefaria, okay, what does Sefaria say? Sefaria says, Bris Krusa Midrash also has the wrong version. Okay. If you go to Torah, it has the right version. Okay. Where is it here? Oh, here we go. And then if you go to the original online good version, Mechon Mamre, then you'll also see, hold on. Mechon Mamre. I have a purpose to this, by the way, and I'm sorry for people who are only listening to this over audio because you're not going to get to see the coolness. It says, where are we here? Okay. Now, let's say you want to be thorough, okay, and question me. So what question can you have on me of the fact that I'm just quoting here and decreeing that this is the right version and the wrong version?
Yeah. The question is, how would you know?
How do I know, right? So I found something called, I just stumbled upon this, okay? It was a link at the bottom of the article, the Friedberg Jewish Manuscript Society, okay? You can create a free account, which I did. And look, so I just literally found this yesterday, so I have not explored any of the resources except I immediately went to Yad HaRambam, okay? Click on Yad HaRambam and watch this. So select a location. Sefer Hamada, Hilchos Torah, Perek Gimel, Yud Beis. I guess I remember my place. Display variant readings. Okay. And watch this. So here we have, okay, And you could sort it in and display it in different ways. I think it's just taking a little bit longer because Zoom takes up a lot of bandwidth. Okay, so we have here our halacha, and I'll try and make it bigger. Let me see if this will work. Yeah. Okay. So make it bigger. Okay. We have our halacha here. Nope. Here. Yeah. Okay. So here you have in Hebrew dfoos romi, resh mem, dfoos kushta, resh samach tes. So these are all names of different manuscripts. Okay. And what you could do is you could compare them. You know what? Just a second. Let me just go back to, yeah. Oh, did I accidentally click it? Oh yeah, sorry. Here we go. You could compare it side by side with the different editions, okay? And the cool thing is, let's say I want to look at the actual manuscript. So you click on the three dots and you go quick view, and you can see with your own eyes the manuscript and zoom in, and it's a very high quality. I think it'll render it in a second. Hold on. Yeah, so they've digitized. Hold on. It's too much. So they've digitized all these things, so you can actually like scrutinize and like look for yourself. Okay, but in a case like this, it's very easy because watch this. So we have in the, and I at some point I would like to learn what what all these manuscripts are and like what the difference is. Here we're going to look for the word. Oh, actually, what, you could do this even better. Synopsis by rows. Hold on. I think we could even go down to the very phrase itself. Loading. Okay. So in Mishneh Torah miskayim b'mishum marapi alas molim. Okay, that was not our halacha. Hold on. Sorry. Like I said, I just discovered this yesterday, so I'm having a hard time navigating here. Why can I not go? Oh, I see. We're going to go to skip to our halacha. Actually, you know what? It's actually clear the other way. I'll go the other way. I'll show you. Hold on. Sorry about this. Okay, so what we're on the lookout for when we skim this is we're on the lookout for the phrase Beis Knesset and Beis Midrash and see which of the manuscripts say which. Okay, so we have here. Okay, so in the first one we have Beis Knesset. Second one, Beis Knesset. Third one, Beis Knesset. So here, when you see it in red, that means that it's illegible, right? So, and some of these are just fragments that we have, right? So Beis Knesset, Beis Knesset, Beis Knesset, Beis Knesset. And now here we're getting to modern editions. Okay, so the Mifal Mishneh Torah, that's the one that we're using. Okay, that's the Mishneh Torah Institute. Rambam Yad Shabsai Frankel, that's the Frankel edition. That's a very good edition. It says Beis Knesset. Rambam Meduyak. That's Rav Shelat. Rav Shelat is another Rambam expert, Beis Knesset. Rambam Adros Kafech. Okay, we know that Kafech is a good one. Beis Knesset. And look, the dfoos, the Vilna one, the Beis Midrash. So this is literally the only one out of all the manuscripts that says Beis Midrash, and this is the one that's published in Vilna. So the thing is like, there are cases in the Rambam where among the authoritative manuscripts, then there are discrepancies, and then you really have to like make a judgment call about, are the Yemenites correct or is the Oxford one correct? But this one is clear. Only the Vilna one says Beis Midrash. And if you go back to Kafech's introduction to the Mishneh Torah, in fact, let me see if I have a copy. Hold on. We did this last year, but I just want to refresh our memories because I don't think anyone. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if anyone was here. Hold on. So this is someone translated the Kafech's intro to the Mishneh Torah into English. Oh yeah. Oh, so he says like this. Hold on. He says, wait, resume. I just saw that word. Yeah. So he says that, yeah, I'm going to start here. The whole thing is really interesting to read. So this is Rav Kafech talking about his process here. He says, when in my youth, I studied the Mishneh Torah with my grandfather of blessed memory. Most people use printed books, each with his own edition, but my grandfather and several of the others had manuscripts which were several hundred years old, each scroll of a different age. Almost every halacha had annotations with variant readings. So they also had this version, obviously, but it was not digitized, right? They had like their own scrolls with different, with different readings. Or different editions. Some were passed over quickly because of their simplicity, and some aroused debate on the subject and its consequences, whether relating to a halacha that will not be applicable until the time of Mashiach or practical matters relating to the customs of our day. These debates were unending daily activities. So this is part of his culture of like going through and learning the Rambam and having all these different texts. The errors and the deficiencies of the printed text, the dfoos, were well known. So much so, this is what I was telling you about, that the printed books were used to characterize a mistaken person. When someone said something incorrect on some subject, they would respond, "You are like a dfoos," and point out the correction. These matters were inscribed on my heart, and I grew up with the assumption that there are two types of Maimonides texts in the world, that of the Yemenite manuscripts and that of the printed book. With study and investigation of the matter, I realized that there were very many differences of various kinds between the Yemenite manuscripts and the printed texts, although the differences were narrowed in the case of the older printed texts like the Roman edition, which was the first one in the column there. We have a tradition from our ancestors, and my grandfather wrote about it in one of his letters, that even during the life of Maimonides, the Jews of Yemen send expert copyists to Egypt to make copies of his manuscripts. And from time to time, they sent for updates and corrections to their books according to the most recent emendations and reconciliations of Maimonides, including the very latest. So they were always getting the updates during the Rambam's lifetime. It has already been shown in the publications of Professor Gotin and my own publications that there was an active two-way traffic between Yemen and Egypt at the time, but this is not the place to repeat those matters. This is not a matter of oral tradition, but there's a provable, reliable basis for it. Okay, fine, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but then he says like this: the Jews of, this is the part I wanted to get to. The Jews of Yemen, both the Chachamim and the individuals, are a conservative group, and they would never have presumed to correct or amend a text that came into their hands, and certainly not in the works of Maimonides, who was respected by them and elevated in their eyes as a source of truth. As reported by Nachmanides, they would say in the Kaddish, meaning when they recited Kaddish, they would say, in our lifetime and in the life of our master and teacher Maimonides. Okay, then he goes on to praise him, and he says, it is therefore clear that every word and sentence that Maimonides wrote was treated as sacred by them, and they never amended any book based on reasoning, and no emendation or variant reading was suggested unless it appeared in the ancient manuscripts. This follows Maimonides himself, who wrote in chapter 15, Laws of the Lender and Borrower, quote, and I have already examined the variant texts, and I have in Egypt an excerpt of an old Gemara written on parchment in the manner in which they wrote over 500 years ago. So the Rambam, when he was learning Gemara, also cared about manuscripts and was looking for the most authentic ones. And again, obviously, he was much more limited than we are now. Therefore, there was preserved in their hands the original version as he wrote it according to his own last changes. This is proven correct by the surviving manuscripts of Maimonides, which conform to the Yemenite manuscripts. Also, the most ancient manuscripts from the rest of the world conform to a certain degree with the Yemenite manuscripts. But in the printed text, only a few of the changes which Maimonides himself inserted in his book appear, since only a few reached the early printers. Some of the emendations which Maimonides added, he wrote in the margins on the side, and the copyists did not pay attention to the correct placement and inserted them in the wrong place, causing much trouble and difficult questions in the understanding of Maimonides' words. I have noted these where they appear. They are few in number, but they have been added to the many other errors that were made. The editors tried to deduce changes. The Mishneh Torah was subject to severe editing by the printers and various editors who made emendations of style, language, the structure of sentences, and the division of the halachot. Okay, and he says, I'll just read this. I have to go on my full rant. He did not number Maimonides himself divided the book into short halachot, as he indicated in his introduction, so that they would be easily studied and memorized. He did not number the halachot, and the numbers were added by copyists. Similarly, in the case of the Guide to the Perplexed, Maimonides made the divisions, but the copyists inserted the numbering as noted in my edition. The Mishneh Torah was heavily edited to the extent that there is hardly any halacha that has not been amended. I know of no other book that was so severely amended, and the reason is clear. There was no other book that was so widely and rapidly disseminated in many countries, and in particular, the lands of the East. This distribution and dissemination was in manuscript form so that everyone had a hand in it. As will be explained below, every third or fourth rate scholar who thought himself capable of doing so would presume to try his hand at making emendations and corrections according to his own understanding. Also, there were truly great scholars who expressed their opinion here and there as a result of a difficult issue raised by the words of Maimonides, and they suggested an alternative reading. They never even thought of changing the text of the book, but others after them did erase the words of Maimonides and insert the alternative reading proposed by the earlier scholars, thereby distorting the meaning and purpose of Maimonides. But the original works of Maimonides, words of Maimonides, if they are understood according to their plain meaning, are crystal clear. I don't know about that. And the emendations are nothing but mistakes, as I've noted in the text. End of rant. Not end of rant, end of Kafak's rant. So here we have in our halacha a very easy case. You can totally see how someone is reading this halacha, says to himself, oh, koya gave a Talmud of Beis HaKnesses. He can't mean Beis HaKnesses. He has to mean Beis Midrash because that's where you learn. And just switched it up, despite the fact that all the other old manuscripts from Rome, the ancient one, and from Kafech, from the Yemenite ones, all say Beis HaKnesses, So it's just like, this is a living example of how important it is to go to the manuscripts. And I have one more rant point, and then I'll take questions, is that one of the things that you'll find among Chachamim, like I'm talking about all Chachamim, in terms of Torah, is there are people who are not aware of different critical versions of texts, and therefore they don't use them. Okay. And you kind of can't blame them if they don't know that there are, better versions of text and they're just using the old ones. Like a lot of people, for example, I was learning Rashi with someone and they didn't know that there are good editions of Rashi and bad editions, And then there are people who know and care. So again, Al HaTorah was started by Rabbi Novetzky as a place to have critical editions online available for everyone. And then, and those people are the people to go to. And then there are people who know that there are critical editions and they still use the old editions. I cannot for the life of me understand why someone would do that if they truly knew that these were corrupt editions. And again, the fact that we have these old Rambams here is a travesty. And he's right, is that in every halacha there are differences. Some of them don't make a difference, and some of them make a world of difference. So I say to this, we need good editions of the Rambam. Thank God we have good editions here, but I think we should purge the old ones. End of rant. Yes, Yosef, what were you going to say or ask?
So a culture of bad copies, people know that people are bad copies, so they constantly make changes.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. It spreads like a plague. Yeah. And the same is true for Gemara, by the way, which is why in the good editions of the Gemara, like Oz V'Hadar, I think was one of the first ones that printed it with various, readings. I mean, look, you don't even go to the Bach and the Gra, the Haggadah Bach and Haggadah Gra. That's what they were doing. They were looking through old manuscripts of the Gemara that were available to them. And they say, I'm sure this is hyperbole, that the Gra would not make I don't know, he would consult 100 different manuscripts to make one change. I don't think there were 100 manuscripts that were available, but and then certainly the Mesivta, and I think modern editions of the Gemara have these reliable manuscripts now. But again, when once Torah Sheba'al Peh is committed to writing, so then it's subject to all of the mistakes that can occur with writing. And it's like Mark Twain said, be careful when reading health books, you might die of a misprint. Same thing is true in halacha. Yeah, Oren?
Just like halacha l'maisa, if I'm learning by myself, what edition should I be looking at?
You should look at either the Mechon Mamre one, which is based on the Yemenite manuscripts. The Al HaTorah one is based on the good manuscripts through Sefer Zmanim. I don't remember if they've changed after that. So the Mechon Mamre one is the most reliable one I know of in its entirety. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Thank you for allowing me to go my rant. But now I have I have more ammo because I can actually bust out the manuscripts and show people and say in your face. And I could get a dfoos sticker and put it on their forehead if they refuse to think about the actual manuscripts. Okay. And you see from here that yet another reason, another pagam. And again, I don't use Sefaria, so I can't say what is good and what's not. And clearly there are things that are very good about Sefaria, but you see from here the Mishneh Torah is not good. Okay, because they're using the bad Mishneh Torah. Okay, so now let's actually figure out what the halacha means. Now that we know that we can't just amend it to say Beis HaMidrash, right? So what does it mean? Anyone who exerts himself in his learning in the Beis HaKnesses, lo bimhera hu shachech, and it's weird that he says kol hayagea atzmo, or yagea b'talmudo, anyone who exerts himself. It doesn't say kol halomed the Beis HaKnesses, right? So what's the deal with that? And then we also asked, he says there's a bris that was sealed, okay? So I think someone asked this question last time. The Rambam doesn't quote a source for this. Now you could say that the source is Chazal, okay? But I was curious. I looked in the to see where the Rambam uses the phrase bris krusa. Like, is this a common thing? So the only other, so he uses bris krusa several times, but the only other time he uses bris krusa in this manner, like that there's a special, like, deal made, with someone. Like, for example, like he uses it in Hilchos Avodah Zarah when he's talking about literally making deals with Ovdei Kochavim. But look where the only other place I found where the Rambam uses it. Okay, so here's our source in Talmud Torah. Then in Matnos Aniyim, okay, this is what he says. And you want, let me just practice what I preached. I'm going to use, since I don't know whether this edition is good, we're going to use Mechon Mamre, Yud Gimel. Oh, and Oren, well, not just Oren, but one other thing, if you're using Mechon Mamre, oh, sorry, we're not in Ezekiel. We're in, where am I going? Zraim. One thing to note about the Mechon Mamre edition is, again, in the Rambam's original Mishneh Torah, he did not write numbers, okay? So the one confusing thing about and the printers inserted the numbers, okay? The one confusing thing about the Mechon Mamre edition is what they do is they make a new set of numbering based on where the Rambam made his divisions. So what this means here is the Rambam had a paragraph, and he had a second paragraph, and he had a third paragraph, okay? But the printers in the dfoos editions made a division here. They put halacha 2 smack dab in the middle of the paragraph. Then they made halacha 3 where the Rambam put halacha 2, and then they made halacha 4 where the Rambam put halacha 3. So if you're ever looking up a source in the Rambam and it refers you to 1, 2, and you're using, or let's say it refers you to 7, 2, right? Parak 7, halacha 2, and you're using the Mechon Mamre, then if you're looking up citations, look based on the bracketed numbers, not based on the bold numbers, because the bracketed numbers are the ones that are based on the printed editions, which is how people cite things. If that makes sense. Okay. So what were we looking at? Oh yeah, bris cruza, right? So he says here, Yud, oh, I was in the wrong parak. Yud Gimel. So look at how the Rambam uses bris cruza here, okay? Wait. I have to look this up 3 times. What did I say? Yud Gimel. Perek Yud, halacha Gimel. Yeah. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. All right. Kol hamalim einav min hatzedaka. So anyone, hold on a second here. Is this the right halacha? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah. Anyone who hides his eyes from tzedakah, let's say like you pretend not to see an ani like looking, begging for tzedakah. Harizeh nikra blial. That person is called a lawless person. That comes from that's a compound word from bliol, without a yoke. Kamosh nikra oved avodah zara blial. Just like someone who worships avodah zara is called a blial. Uva avodah zara hu omer, and by avodah zara it says yatu anashim b'nei blial. So that's a term associated with avodah zara. And it uses that term by tzedakah. It says, guard yourself, lest there is any matter in your heart that is b'lial. V'nikra rasha, and you're called a rasha. Shnamar, as it says, v'rachmei rashaim achzari, the mercies of the wicked are cruel. Cruel. V'nikra chote, and you're called a sinner. Shnamar, v'kara alecha el Hashem v'haya b'chachet. As it says, he will call out to Hashem, and there will be a sin in you. Okay. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, see, the Rambam puts this in a different paragraph here, but the dfoos mashed it into the same paragraph. HaKadosh Baruch Hu karov l'shavas ha'aniyim. God is close to the outcry of the poor. Shenemar, as it says, shavas aniyim ata tishma. Interesting. Look at that. What does it mean when the Mechon Mamre puts a question mark here? No.
We don't know what he's quoting.
Yeah, we don't know what he's quoting, right? So if it was unsure of the gears, we would just look up the pasuk. But the fact that it doesn't quote means that it's unsure of what he was quoting. And this is a big question, just methodological side point, by the way. It's a big question whenever the Rambam misquotes a pasuk, okay? Because there's certain things that the Rambam wrote when he was on the run. Like the Pirush Mishnayos, he wrote in haste when he was fleeing from the Almohads, certain parts of it. Letters, you never know what condition the Rambam was in when he was writing a letter. But the Mishneh Torah he was going over constantly. So it's very hard to just say that the Rambam, made a mistake that lasted decades, because the Rambam was editing this for the rest of his life. So whenever the Rambam misquotes or a pasuk, it's always a question of why is he misquoting it? Is he explaining it? Did he really mean for all of it to be in quotation marks? Here, it's even more difficult. I've never seen this before, where the Rambam just quotes a pasuk that doesn't seem to exist. We'll see what all Torah says on it in a second. But then he says, "Lefikach tzarich lizaher mitzah akasan." Oh, sorry. The pasuk says, "The outcry of the ani you hear." Lefikach tzarich lizar mita'akas, and therefore you need to be careful about their outcry. Shahari bris krusa lahem. There is a covenant sealed with them. Shneimar, as it says, "V'haya ki yitzak elai v'shamati ki chanun ani." As it says, when he and it will be that when he cries out to me, I will hear because I am gracious. So I think this is the only other time in the Mishneh Torah where the Rambam says bris krusa, where he's talking about like this kind of bris. Again, like by Bikurin, here's another source here, but I think that's that's like a bris with the what do you call it? Like the matanos kahuna, the gifts of the kahuna, and that's like a halachic thing. And this is talking about a literal bris in Shemitah and Yovel. That's talking about the little bris with the avos, you know. So why am I going into this? Because the Rambam here seems to imply that there's like some sort of like, there he's talking about special hashgacha. Like it literally says, if the poor person cries out, then God will listen to them and respond. And it says God is close to the aniyim, to the outcry of aniyim. So it sounds like this is not just a figure of speech. It sounds like the Rambam saying there's some sort of like special hashgacha. But how does that work? And why the Beis HaKnesses? Okay, that's the end of the questions. Oh, and also, sorry, it's not the end of the questions. He will not forget quickly, which implies he will forget, right? It's not going to make him like have a photographic memory. It's just he won't forget quickly. So what do we make of this?
All right, I have a lot of things. I think I have a question and an answer to
Okay, go
different
ahead.
things. One, just what does Brit Kruta literally mean?
Literally means a covenant is cut, but that's an expression in biblical Hebrew for like we say in English, I'll cut you a deal, you know? So it means a covenant is sealed. I think we like using the term sealed with covenants. I think the reason why it says cut, by the way, is because according at least to some Mefarshim, what they would do when they would make a covenant is they would cut an animal in half. And that's like the Avram covenant between the parts where they split the animals and they walked in between. And the symbolism there I've heard is that two Mefarshim, I don't remember who says what, but one is like, if I'm making a deal with you, then I cut the animal as an expression of, if one of us breaks the deal, then we should be cut. Like, you know, we should suffer like a fate like this animal does. The other explanation I've heard is, if you and I make a deal, now we're in a partnership, like two halves of this animal that like naturally belong together, you know? So it's like symbolic of the deal.
Okay. And so as for the you won't forget, so you asked, it says you won't forget quickly, which sounds like you'll still forget.
Right.
I don't know. An idea maybe is that like, oh, you always need to be doing chazara, and you know, you'll forget you'll inevitably forget unless you do chazara. Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not great.
So right. So meaning you're saying that this halacha is addressing the speed of forgetting, but then the phenomenon of forgetting per se, you obviously need to do chazara to prevent. Is that what you're saying for that?
Yeah, I think this halacha is kind of just taking that fact for granted.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a premise of this halacha that's there.
Right. But you are still acknowledging that we still need to explain how it is that doing it in shul prevents you from forgetting quickly, right?
Yeah, that does not answer
okay.
what I said. Does not answer that at all.
Okay, sure, good. Just want to make sure I'm understanding you. Yeah. Yeah. And see, and this is the weirder thing. I think I mentioned this last time, that the very next halacha does seem to potentially go against it. Actually, all three halachas kind of clash with each other in different ways. Anyone who engages in his learning in sina, which again means either, I mean, you could say it means in secret. I mean, it means in modesty, machkim, becomes wise. With the modest is wisdom. And snuim often means doing it and concealing the fact that you're doing it. Like, for example, that's the drasha. Okay, hold on. I'm going to show you this drasha in case it's relevant here. I have to find it first. Okay, so it's in Micha. Hatsnea. Why am I not typing? Okay. Hatsnea. I'm one off. Hatsnea leches. Oh man. Okay. There we go. Did I ever tell you the superhero origin story of how I learned how to type quickly in Hebrew without looking at the keyboard? Is when when Davka Writer, I think was still a new program. That was the Hebrew typing program. They had, I'm sure you've seen like keyboards with the Hebrew letters that you stick onto your keyboard. So I was sticking them onto my keyboard when I first got the program, and I stuck them one off by mistake. And then, so I did the whole half of the keyboard, and then I had to pull all of them off, and they didn't stick again. So I could have ordered new stickers, but instead I was like, oh, I'll just like learn the Hebrew stuff by memory. And then somehow that just made it very fast. Because I didn't have to like, I never went through the step of like looking onto the keyboard to know where the Hebrew letters were. And so that was ended up being a benefit. Okay, so this is a famous pasuk. Micha. Is this, did I just quote the wrong pasuk? Ches. Micha vav ches. Yeah. Bama akadem Hashem ikaf lelokei marom. With what should I present myself before Hashem? Should I ikaf lelokei marom, to make myself submissive to the God on high? Ha'akad menu ba'olos. Should I present myself with burnt offerings, ba'agalim b'nei shana, with 1-year-old calves? Ha'yirtei Hashem ba'alfi elim. Does God want thousands of rams? Birivos nachle shaman, with multitudes of rivers of oil. Ha'atin b'chori. Should I give my firstborn, Pish'i, for my offense? Pri vitni, the fruit of my womb. Chatas nafshi, for the sin of my soul. Higid l'cham adam matov. Uma Hashem doresh mimcha. So tell a man what is good and what Hashem wants. So here are the 3 things Hashem wants. Okay, you want to know the 3 things? Boil it down to 3. Is Kim asos mishpat, va'avas chesed, v'hatznei lechasim elokecha. Do justice, love kindness, and walk modestly with your God. And Rashi there quotes Chazal that says, what does it mean? V'hatznei lechas lo. No, Rashi doesn't quote it. Someone must quote it. Yaakov Shimoni, maybe? Yeah. Amar Rabbi Elazar, asos mishpat zehadin. So doing mishpat, that refers to applying the law, or doing judgment. Va'avas chesed zeg milus chasadim. That refers to doing kindness. Lasnei leches zo hotza'as hames v'hachnasas kala. Okay, that's referring to escorting the dead and like rejoicing with the kala. Okay. So that sounds weird. Like, why would walking modestly refer to just those 2 things? So the Gemara, the Midrash says, this is really meant to be a kal v'chomer. Ma devarim she'ein darcham lasos and betzina amra Torah v'hatznei alechas. If those things which people are not accustomed to do modestly, the Torah says you should be modest, meaning people do not have like funerals where it's just in private, or they don't have weddings where people don't see things. Don't see the celebration. So if people do that, if you should do that with modesty, so things that it is the derech to do them in private, then even more so. So I'm bringing this in to show you that it's that sina here means privately. Okay, it doesn't just mean, I mean, it means modestly also, but it has a denotation or at least a connotation of privacy. Okay, so that we said is weird because the Beis HaKnesses is by definition the public place, where everyone's gathered, and yet he's saying if you exert yourself in your learning in private, then you're going to become wise. And if you make your voice audible, now I think I raised this, and I think maybe Chaim said it just means that you have to hear yourself speak. But if you look at the minhag hamakom in any Beis Midrash, it's to be loud, and if you look at the reason, like I think this we can explain just on a simple psychological level or neurological level. Why would learning out loud make it so that you don't forget quickly? Do you think? Say again? Yeah, but why should that make a difference? I mean, I'm not saying there's one answer, but so Rav Makbili has a theory, which I think is reasonable. He says, "Shene'ezar b'chush hashmiya," because you're also making use of the sense of hearing. V'kacha limud niklat tov yoser, and therefore the learning will be internalized more. So in general, the more senses you involve in something, then the more it sticks with you. Like if you're I mean, and we see this halachically. I don't even have to prove it psychologically from nevuah, that anyone who was wanting to get nevuah would involve all of their senses because they could focus their mental energy more. That's why they say Yitzchak asked for his favorite food before he blessed Esav, and then touched him and smelled him, because all of these things involving taste that's associated with Esav and touch and smell, he couldn't involve sight. And then he also listened for his voice, because the more senses you involve, then the more your mind can be focused on the thing, and you'll internalize learning better. But anyway, so I'm saying from there, I don't think it just means that you should hear yourself, like whisper it to yourself. I think it means ideally the louder you are, the better. And that's, you go to any Beis Midrash and people are very loud. So it is weird that the first and the third clause of this halacha kind of clash with the second clause of doing it in secret or in privately.
Does modesty, like Sina, does that have to mean in secret, or maybe that can mean something else?
Yeah, so
modest?
it doesn't have to mean in secret. I gave a shiur on this pasuk in Mishlei that says, what's the first half of this? I'm gonna actually get the source sheet I used. Mishlei, this was on Monday night shiur. And I want to show you, why is it searching Mishlei showing me refrigerators? That's funny. Okay. Yeah. So this is a difficult pasuk to translate. Ba zadon v'yavo kalon v'es tznuim chachma. When a brazen man comes, then shame comes, and with the modest is chachma. So I just want to show you Rabbeinu Yonah, just so you can see how he describes tznius here. So he says, "Umiut hadvarim mimidas hatznuim." Minimizing speech is a quality of those who are modest. But tznius gurimes chachma leba'aleha. Tznius causes chachma to the one who possesses it, meaning to the one who has tznius. Ki midas hachachamim, because this is the trait of chachamim asher ba yiknu es hachachma, through which they acquire chachma. Ki yishma'u v'yakshivu, because they listen and pay attention to what other people are saying, and they don't want to reveal their minds. So the way we explained it in the shiur on that pasuk was basically, tznius is the opposite of self-assertive. Self-assertive, obviously you need to be self-assertive in some ways, but the brazen man, the ish zadon, is someone who basically wants to impose himself on other people and get them to notice him. Snua means that you're not trying to attract attention to yourself or to your mind or to your qualities. And what we theorize is an underlying value is that you don't define yourself based on what other people think of you, So we use that to explain, even though Mishlei is not talking about tznius in terms of dress, we use that to explain the tznius of, let's say, like, how women dress. I mean, it's not just women, but it's most familiar with women, is that, women always have this pitfall, and in this society, men have this also, but women, especially through all societies, have this pitfall where people relate to them based on how they look, and then they start to define themselves based on how they look, so there you're making your own self-worth based on other people's opinions. And one of the functions of tznius, clothing in society, is to make it so that you don't define yourself based on your appearance and on your beauty. So too with chachma in this pasuk, where if you're always going around trying to show off your chachma, so then you're really relating to chachma in a kavod-based way, where you want people to view you as wise. But someone who is tsunua in his chachma will shut up and listen when there's a greater chacham speaking, or when he can learn from people, and he won't just assert himself into the public domain and always try to attract attention to his own mind. So that was our theory of tznius. I can't say whether or not oops, sorry, this is a wrong source sheet. That's a preview for Wednesday night shiur. Wednesday night shiur, working title Wednesday night Chumash shiur. Would the Rambam approve of davening at the grave of the fifth matriarch? Think about that one. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, that's a teaser. No, good guess though. Or you could say the seventh matriarch if you want to include Bill and Zilpah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So does that answer your question, Oren? That tznius is tznius is the opposite of Tznius is when you don't define yourself based on what other people think of you. And that's how we want to differentiate between tznius and humility. Humility ultimately is defining yourself based on knowledge of reality, but it's more of a positive quality. Tznius, the way we understood it, is more of a negative quality, of the absence of this like thrusting yourself onto other people and like defining yourself based on how they react.
So maybe here it means like, not sitting in the front of the shul, or like not having 20 books at your desk and,
right,
like stuff like that.
That I was thinking a similar thing, is that it has to be, so if you're doing it in shul, one approach, I think someone said this last time, someone said, well, maybe you can't do both. Maybe you can't get chachma and also prevent yourself from forgetting. And I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like it'd be weird if Rambam put these, I don't know, he sandwiches this in the middle of this halacha. I feel like these can go together, he doesn't present it as a choice, like there are certain things with the choice. Like, I'll give you an example of this. The Rambam said earlier, I'll get back to what you said in a second, Oren. The Rambam said in 3:6, don't lo yasim al libo sheyikne Torah im ha'osher v'kavod ke'achad. Don't take it to heart. Don't set yourself on trying to get Torah with wealth and honor simultaneously, So there he's overtly saying you can't get both. And there is a chazal that says, when you're davening Shemona Esrei, then if you want to become wise, you should face south. The menorah and the Beis Hamikdash was in the south. Yeah, if you want to become wise, you should face south. And if you want to become wealthy, you should face north. And the Achronim debate on, like, does that mean that you should physically turn your body in when you're davening Shemona Esrei and face a different direction? Does it mean you should face your head? But the simplest explanation I saw is that whether or not the statement's made to be taken literally, you can't do both. You can't daven in a way that makes you, like, you can't physically face north and south at the same time, so that's the idea here. So I think if the Rambam wanted to say that these are mutually exclusive, then he would have said so in some way. So going back to what you said, therefore it has to mean that, yeah, you're learning in shul, but you're minimizing the ways in which people attract attention to themselves, and that's hard to do. Like, again, like, I do want to give some advice here, which is that, when we were going through the Lo Lishma stuff, then I mentioned this then, is that, the penultimate level before Lishma is kavod. And Rabbi Moskowitz, my Rebbe, used to always say that, like, the best Lo Lishma is that you learn in order to be viewed as a chacham, because then at least ideally you'll behave in ways that are befitting of chachamim. You'll learn so that people will view you as a chacham, and you'll like act in ways that reflect positively on you in society as a chacham. So it's bad. Like, don't prematurely get rid of your Lo Lishmas. Like, yeah, it's true that if you don't define yourself based on what people think, then you'll become wise. But if that's your Lo Lishma and you undo it too quickly, then you won't learn. There's a story. I don't know if this is a Hasidic story. It's just one of these like anecdotes that I heard, or these stories that I heard, is that there was a guy who was, I think I heard this from Rav Schechter. I don't know. I feel like I heard this from him. I don't know. So there was a guy learning in the Beis Midrash, okay, and he wanted to be a Talmud Chacham, and then he was like, oh, maybe I'm too attached to my ego, so like I'm not going to learn the Beis Midrash because then everyone's seeing me, and I'm like taking ego pleasure in the fact that people see me. So then he went into his room, okay, like his bedroom, and to learn. Oh no, I know what it was. Sorry. Yeah, he was learning at night. He was learning late at night, okay, in the Beis Midrash, and he's like, oh, people will see me in the Beis Midrash staying later than everyone, and that's good for my, that boosts my ego. So like, I'm going to avoid that. So he said, okay, I'm going to learn in my room. So he went to his room, and then he's like, then people will see that I have a candle, and they'll assume that I'm learning, and this is bad for my ego. So I'll blow out the candle, and I'll just like memorize the text to learn. And then he's like, but then people will see me like shuffling around, and in my room, and like when I'm pacing, so I'll lie down in bed, and then people will hear me saying it out loud, so I'll say it in my mind, and he ended up just going to sleep, And I think it actually fits in very well with this point, because the moral of the story is, yeah, it's nice to not be concerned about your ego, but if that actually literally undermines your learning, then you should really be very egotistical and like attached to the lo lishma, and don't let that stop you. And you could tell, again, this wasn't the point of the story, but the guy is so preoccupied with how people are viewing him. Maybe that's really like what you should work on, And I'll give you an example from my life is that I remember, and this is something that unless you're a ger, then I don't know if you can understand it. Maybe Bali Tshuva can understand it to a certain extent, but Bali Tshuva do feel like they're part of the tribe, As a ger and as a ger who does not look Jewish, there is a lot of insecurity about like people not, about like wanting people to view me as Jewish and like wanting to look like a legitimate Jew, So when I was going to, even as late as when I was going to YU to graduate school, so we're talking like I'd already been in yeshiva for like 6 years, I still had this insecurity. And so what I would do is if I had a choice between whether to listen to a shiur on like my iPod or whether to learn from a sefer, I learned from a sefer because I had this need for people to not like for people to look at me and see that I had a yarmulke, and like if they just look at me and they're like, oh, that guy's just listening to music versus, oh, he's learning, it would have this like feeling, oh, so he is a real Jew, like, because this was on a train to Washington Heights where there are lots of like Jews coming and going, so like, and I on the one hand was cognizant of the fact that I cared what people thought, but I learned a lot from the sefer on all those train rides, so don't, so when you I agree with Oren's shot that this means, don't do it in a way that draws attention to yourself, but at the same time, be mindful about the fact that like if you need that ego boost in order to sustain high quality learning, so then go for it. Don't prematurely undo your lo lishmas. There we go. Okay, so the only thing we didn't explain. Oh yeah, Oren, go ahead.
So to try to explain away the seeming contradiction between modesty and being loud, it's just that if everyone is loud, then it doesn't matter if you're loud also, because
that's true.
You'll blend in just as much. And if Sina is blending in, or if it's not standing out rather, then it won't make a difference. But then there's a new question though, which is that if the goal is to not stand out, right? If that's what modesty is, or to not want to stand out rather, then why would you be learning in the shul? Like,
yes, right. Yeah. That's that very, very good follow-up question. And I actually want to just look up a halacha really quickly. I think the Rambam brings it down in Sefer Ahava in Hilchos Tefillah, and I believe it is here. Yeah, check this out. So this is in Halach Perik Yud Aleph in Hilchos Tefillah Ubirkas Kohanim Halach Yud Daled. Mutar lasos Beis HaKnesses Beis Midrash. Of all Beis Midrash ain't osinos of Beis HaKnesses. You can. It is so. The premise here is you are allowed to take things of a lower kedusha and make them into objects of a higher kedusha, but not the other way around. So like you can make a mezuzah into. Actually, I don't know my parchments. Assuming that parchment-wise is okay, you can make a mezuzah into tefillin, because tefillin is a higher level of kedusha, but you can't make tefillin into mezuzah. So he says here, you can make a shul into a Beis Midrash, but you can't make a Beis Midrash into a shul. Shekedushas Beis HaMidrash Yisera al Kedushas Beis HaKnesses, because the kedusha of the Beis Midrash is a higher level than that of a Beis Midrash. Sorry, the Beis Midrash is higher than that of Beis Knesses. Umalim b'kodesh v'lamurin, and we go up in kedusha and not lower. So. And I think I think Chazal. Hold on. Okay, I don't know what the source of that is. I want to say that the sources are going to support what we're going to say, but I don't want to. I can't find it right now, and I don't want to look for it right now. But right. So the question is, so Oren's point was, if everyone is raising their voice, so then you will not stand out, and you could beat Sanua and raise your voice at the same time. The only problem is in a Beis Midrash, everyone is going to be doing it, but not in a Beis Knesses. Right. Yeah. So it comes back to this Beis Knesses thing. By the way, just a side point here, also a relevant one. I also just want to draw attention to the fact that those who were raised in a Beis Midrash environment can take it for granted how absolutely alien it is to non-Jews to have yelling in a study hall, and I don't know about all non-Jews. I mean, I know like in a madrasa that then they also are allowed, but like in America, in the West, or in like Europe, in like England, if you go to like, Cambridge in the library and you're like shouting like, Shakespeare at the top of your lungs, I think you're going to get some weird looks. And it is just an interesting culture, to have that. And I think it's easy to like lose sight of that. I get it. I got it a little bit in teaching high school girls because they're not exposed to the Beis Midrash environment as early as as guys are, So like the first time they're in a Beis Midrash environment and everyone's like at the top of their lungs, then they have a hard time concentrating. I found a lot of them. Yeah, Beis Knesses. So I have one step, and only one step, and it's based on the Sefer Mitzvos. So let's look at the Sefer Mitzvos. Now, speaking of finding good versions of the Sefer Mitzvos, oops, I did. Yeah.
Actually, never mind.
Okay. So the best version of the Sefer Mitzvos I know of online is in this other place called da'at.ac.il. In the library section. The font looks really weird when it's big. They have the Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam translated by Kafech, and I think it's an older edition. Okay, so if you look in Sefer HaMitzvos say halacha, mitzvah chamishi, the fifth mitzvah, he hatzivui shnitzavinu la'ovdo yis'aleh. This is the mitzvah to serve God. Okay, now what this mitzvah is repeated in the Torah many times. You shall serve Hashem your God. You shall serve him. And it says, him shall you serve. Amar ula ovdo, and it says to serve him. Okay, now what is this mitzvah? So he'll say, even though this mitzvah is in the general commandments, meaning the things that command you to keep all the mitzvos, like we explained in the fourth of the Shorashim, there is a specification. So all the psukim that say serve God, even though it means serve God through all the mitzvos, it also means specifically tefillah. Okay, that's why of lashon sifrei ulovdo zot tefillah, v'amru od ulovdo zet Talmud. Okay, so ulovdo, whenever you see the pasuk that says serve God, it means tefillah, but it also means Talmud Torah, also means learning. How do you know that tefillah, the root of tefillah is in the mitzvos? From this pasuk, as Hashem Elokecha tirav oso savod. Hashem your God you shall fear or revere, and him shall you serve. V'amrehu avdehu b'toraso, avdehu b'mikdasho. And it says serve him with his Torah, that's learning. Avdehu b'mikdasho, serve him in his mikdash, and that's davening in the mikdash. Hakavana lishof lihispalel bo. The intent is to yearn to daven for him, and facing mikdash. Kamosh bi'ar Shlomo, like Shlomo explained. So you see from here that Talmud Torah is a type of avodah shebelev. So the only thing I can think of here, okay, is yes, Beis Midrash is the place that's designated to learn, but Beis HaKnesses is the place that's designated for avodah shebelev. So perhaps this has something to do with the avodah shebelev dimension of Talmud Torah, as opposed to the like raw, like passing on the Masorah dimension. What that is, I don't know. And why it prevents you from forgetting, I also don't know. And why it's a bris, I don't know. But I think it's a solid step, if I do say so myself.
But how is that modest?
I'm not answering that question. I'm just trying to understand how why the Beis Knesses is a good place for it.
Because it's where the bris is, and where we call the bris.
Where do you see that we recall the bris with? Yeah, my question. Repeat my step. Yeah, the basic step is that Talmud Torah is also a form of avodah shebelev, and Beis HaKnesses is the makom of avodah shebelev. Yeah. I think it feels like a solid step, right? It's just I don't know where to go with it. And the problem is that the Rambam source of this is the Talmud Yerushalmi. So it's not like we have like ample commentaries on agadas from the Talmud Yerushalmi. You know, I didn't actually do a search for this to see if anyone explains it, but yeah. So you know what? Let's do. Let's read the next. Oh, you have a step, yeah.
Just think about the scene of this because the thing about standing out could be like if you have your own private study that's like you being different from everyone else, but if everyone learns the basic Knesset, going there is not standing out, therefore it's
right. So you're essentially applying orient answer for the third clause to the first clause, or to his question on the first clause, right? Saying that if everyone's doing this, then that's fine. You know, I'll tell you, it could be. See, there's also something I don't know, which is I don't know what role the Beis HaKnesses had in the time of Chazal that differed from the way our Beis HaKnesses is. For example, I read an article from the Rav, about the way that Batei Knesios were in Europe, and he was saying how like the Beis HaKnesses, he said growing up he felt like the Beis HaKnesses was his home, and like people would like hang out in the Beis HaKnesses and like. You know, like, let me actually just get the actual thing because I might be misremembering because he was describing the Misnagdim one and the Hasidic one. And I forgot which was which. So this is in Hakira magazine in the most recent issue. The most recent issue. So therefore, current issue, this is the only one that they had. Yeah. So he says, and then we'll stop in a little while. So he's quoting a Gemara in Brachos. Yeah. Rather, Rava said the synagogue is equivalent to one's home. Just as with regard to one's home, one minds it being used as a shortcut, but does not mind spitting or wearing shoes there. Okay, maybe that changed now. So too is the case with regard to the synagogue. Using it as a shortcut is prohibited. Spitting or wearing shoes there is permitted. And the Rav says a synagogue is on the same footing as a man's house. Just as a man objects to his house being used as a shortcut, fine. All right. So where does he say this though? He gives a really good description. So he brings a lot of other proofs that the shul is like a home, and then he describes his personal. Oh yeah, the Jew lives in the Beis HaKnesses and spends many hours there. It is the property of the Jew. The owner of the Beis HaKnesses is the tzibor of the congregation. Halachically, it is possible that an individual can own a Beis HaKnesses, but an individual cannot own the mikdash. He was contrasting this between this and the mikdash. The mikdash is hekdesh. It is the property of the Almighty. Of course, the Shekhinah resides in the Beis HaKnesses. Like the pasuk says, "Ve'ehi lahem lemikdash ma'at." I will be for them as a small mikdash. That's in Yechezkel 11:16. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Elu Batei Knesios uBatei Midrashos shebeBavel. These are the Batei Knesios and Batei Midrash in Bavel. I have been for them a miniature sanctuary, Rabbi Yitzchak says. These are okay, fine. The Beis HaKnesses is a miniature Beis HaMikdash. Yes, but the Beis HaKnesses is different than the Mikdash. The Shekhinah is in the Beis HaKnesses. Sorry, the Shekhinah in the Beis HaKnesses is the guest and the Jew is the host. The Shekhinah is a distinguished visitor and the Jew extends a gracious invitation to the king to visit him. The Jew entertains this illustrious guest. Therefore, the element of fear is completely out of context. Why fear the Beis HaKnesses? All right, then he goes on. But my point in bringing this up here is like I don't feel like we relate to our Beis HaKnesses like this as a home, you know. Like he listen to his personal experience, the Beis HaMidrash home experience. So here he's describing the Beis HaMidrash home experience. He's saying how he felt. Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, he says. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, well, this is him describing home, right? He contrasts it, but he says, the Beis Midrash home experience belongs to my earliest memories. There was a Beis Midrash across the street from my parents' home. I remember all the lamps burning. I remember hearing Slichos. It was a strong and powerful experience for me. I felt the unity of home and Beis Midrash. I was not afraid to be alone at home. It was one big house. All the people in the Beis Midrash belonged to one mysterious family, and I was a member of it. Later, as a teenager, when I studied under Father, I spent the majority part of the day and a good part of the night there during the Bolshevik Revolution. It was cold at home, and mostly I was hungry, and the Beit HaMidrash became my home. At the very least, I saw it as an extension of my home and felt good there, as if Mother protected me there as she did at home. Then he goes and says that the shuls are not like that. So that description we just read is a description of him. Oh, I wasn't sharing, whatever. That description was a description of how he's saying you should view the shul. And I feel like we don't view the shul this way, you know? So we might be missing something here in terms of like what a Beis Knesset is supposed to feel like. Okay, so let's think about it for tomorrow. we'll try coming back to a Glean editor one last time tomorrow, and then we'll move on if we can't figure anything out. All right. Have a good day. And remember, kids, always use the right Rambam.
Can we check tomorrow the way that the Rambam uses the way he talks about Batei Knessets?
That's an excellent idea. That is an excellent idea. That would be the proper place to go. So I will try to remember to do that, and we'll that's actually a fantastic idea. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. That's good Rambam methodology. Very good. Okay, see you later. Bye.
See you. Thank you.